Interesting week is behind us, and we are looking forward for this week and looking forward for the trading opportunities. That is why I am speaking with David Jones, Chief Market Strategist, Capital.com. Hello, David.
Hello.
And let's start by saying a few words about the crude oil. Crude oil WTI, second time this month, is attacking $30 per barrel. Do you think there's going to be a breakout on this resistance level?
I think we might see oil struggle up here, and there are a couple of things to keep an eye on. I think first of all, we have seen over the weekend a rise in coronavirus cases in the US. I think something like 20 US states are saying that they've seen a jump to record levels for the virus in terms of cases. So I think that is something that has introduced some nervousness into financial markets at the beginning of this week, thinking, well, hang on, will we need to see the reintroduction of restrictions perhaps? How is it going to impact the economy? All of that. So I think there's a bit of nerves there that are clearly anything that affects the economy has an impact on the oil price. But also there's these OPEC plus cuts that are in place, slightly less than 10 million barrels a day, I think is the cut. And at the moment, that's expected to run to the end of July. But there's no news as to whether that's going to be the case in August. So I think at the moment, the market's worried about perhaps a slowdown in the economy again. And also, are we going to see increase in production in oil during August? So I think there are two things. We could just see just some back and forth trading for oil in the days ahead until some of these problems are resolved or addressed.
Tomorrow we will find out about the June PMI from France, Germany, Great Britain, and of course the whole Eurozone. Looking at this data, looking on the what market is predicting, looking at this PMI, we can wondering is there anything will be, as you can say, positive about this PMI data. What do you think?
I think it's going to be a really interesting number to watch for stock markets and currency markets. Like you said, the PMI data is forward-looking. You know, it's Purchasing Managers Index. It really maybe suggests how well they see their business in the months ahead. We had a low reading of 33.4 to go. Last month, we saw a bounce back to 39.4. So I think that what's going to be interesting to watch, is it bigger again than last month's number? So is it more than 9.4? So I think if we did see that, then it does suggest that the recovery is still ongoing and businesses are confident. So I think plus or minus from that 39.4 number is going to be the big one here. Clearly, it's still a lot less than we're used to, but it will be used, I think, as a barometer to see if the recovery, the slow recovery we're seeing in economies, is continuing. So I think it's a really important number to watch this one.
We are talking about the European economy. Let's look at the German economy, and especially let's look about the Lufthansa, because Deutsche Lufthansa AG is facing a momentous week as a clash between the country's government and the airline's biggest shareholder threatens to scupper a €9 billion bailout package. So what do you think, David? Is it possible? Is there a possibility of insolvency for Lufthansa?
I think there's always a possibility, given the state of airlines around the world because of the virus over the last few months, and we've seen, you know, plenty of planes, most planes grounded. I would be surprised if it happens with Lufthansa, though. As you say, there's the dispute between the government getting the bailout and Lufthansa's largest shareholder is not happy, I think, about the German government taking a 20% stake in Lufthansa as a clearly a major shareholder. But today we did have the German finance minister was sounding positive and saying that he thinks a deal, an agreement will be reached. But I agree, it's going to be really closely watched this week. The share price clearly is heavily down compared to where it was at the end of last year, but it's up about 30% off the May low. So I think we have maybe some nerves about this deal, but I would be surprised if some sort of agreement isn't reached. Because as you say, you know, the threat is that is it going to go out of business, and that does no favors for shareholders or the government.
Wirecard AG, a company once hyped as the future of German finance, said the 1.9 billion euros is missing from its balance sheet and probably doesn't exist. So my question to you is, looking at the Wirecard, it lost over 85% in 1 week. How do you see this asset? Is there anything that can help Wirecard, or are we supposed to be very, very worried about this company?
I mean, it is a little story, like you say, and these stories, they're not unheard of, but they come along fairly often. You know, we go back to the likes of perhaps Enron, I think is a name that those of us who are old enough can remember. You know, was an incredible company. And again, it was all a house of cards and it fell. Wirecard has said this is something like 25% of its balance sheet. Like you say, this 1.9 billion euros may not even exist. The company said the chief executive left last Friday. The shares have taken something of a hit. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go out of business, but I think when we have a story like this, we can expect, I think, massive volatility for the share price in percentage terms, I'm sure, in the days ahead. And it just depends, I think, whether they can maybe put in new management, try to restructure the company and start things over again. You know, I think it's going to be a really interesting story to watch, but it's the sort of share, I think, that is perhaps only for higher risk tolerant investors at the moment. A quite incredible story over the last week or so for a while.
Let's go back to the foreign exchange market. New Zealand cash rate this week. Do you think there will be some surprises looking at the latest central bankers from New Zealand?
I don't think so. I think the New Zealand interest rate is a quarter of 1% at the moment, so 0.25%. So no changes expected there. But I think maybe what is more concerning for the New Zealand economy is they are still worried about, we're going to go back to the virus, the second wave of the coronavirus. You know, we saw some more cases there, I think brought in by people from the UK, unfortunately. So I think they're still worried about the impact that's going to have on the economy. So I don't think much excitement around the interest rate. But perhaps as usual, I think central banks speak about the economy. If the New Zealand Central Bank offers an opinion on what it thinks about the economy, how long will it take to get out of recession, that's probably going to be the thing that's closer watched in this announcement this week.
In this week, there will be also GDP from United States. And my question to you is this will be the most important data that will decide about the strength of an US dollar?
I don't think it's going to be that important. You know, it's like you say, it's the third revision of GDP. We know how bad economies around the world have been hit, but so I don't think we'll see maybe a massive reaction by the US dollar. But I think the US dollar is really interesting. If you look at the dollar index, the dollar against a different currencies, we saw massive volatility when the pandemic really spread in March. It recovered really quickly as investors saw the dollar as a safe haven, but it's fallen again. But in the last week, we have seen the dollar start to recover. So I think perhaps it's a really interesting market to watch now. We'll be interested to see how it reacts to these numbers, but perhaps over the next few weeks and few months, the story will be of a US dollar recovery, despite, you know, these low interest rates that we're seeing in the US and the commitment to keep it that way. So some volatility over this GDP announcement, but I would expect the US dollar to continue to recover from here.
So what will be the most important data in this week looking at the US dollar?
I think perhaps the spike in cases for the virus in the US. I think we saw, you know, over the week, we did see a very weak opening for overnight futures for the US stock market. They have recovered. We saw gold this morning push to a 1-month high, I think off the back of this spike in virus cases. And that clearly, we saw some dollar weakness there. So I do think it's perhaps more about what does this mean for the US? Is it just a short-term spike in the virus? Is it starting to spread again? So I think it's going to be the news around the pandemic is probably going to have the bigger effect on the US dollar over the next few days.
David, thank you very much for this conversation. My guest and yours was David Jones, Chief Market Strategist at Capital.com.
Thank you very much.